In the next 13 springs you'll give me 10 sons," the giant cowboy declared to the lonely black teacher, his voice cutting through the desert wind as townspeople gathered in stunned silence. The frontier settlement saw her as nothing more than a failed experiment, the educated Negro woman who dared teach in their midst, destined for inevitable defeat under their systematic cruelty. They whispered she'd be gone by winter, broken by isolation and contempt. But this towering stranger, with calloused hands and surprising gentleness, had ridden 200 specifically to find her, carrying secrets that could transform her from dismissed outcast to the most powerful landowner in 3 counties. His impossible vow held the key to everything: her hidden inheritance, his violent past, and a truth that would shatter their world's foundations. Would his arrival seal her doom as the town's latest spectacle, or unleash forces that would remake them all? The empty chairs stared back at Esperanza like silent judges. She straightened her shoulders and continued the arithmetic lesson to the vacant schoolhouse. Her voice echoed off cracked walls and broken windows outside, voices carried on the morning breeze, still talking to herself in there. Waste of good lumber. That building should have run her out months ago. Esperanza's hand trimmed slightly as she wrote numbers on the weathered chalkboard. 3 students sat in the front row, 2 young children from the settlement's edge, and Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman learning her letters. The rest of Dustwood Ridge had made their position clear. Cordelia Whitmore's voice rose above the others outside. "This foolishness has gone on long enough. No decent family sends their children to learn from her kind." The door creaked open. Little Sarah ducked inside, tears streaming down her dark cheeks. "Miss Esperanza, my mamma says I can't come any more. Says folks will stop buying our washing if I keep coming here." Esperanza knelt beside the 8-year-old. "Education is never wasted. Sarah, remember that." The child nodded and slipped back outside. Mrs. Patterson gathered her worn primer. "I'll try to come tomorrow, but my grandson's getting pressure at the mill." She squeezed Esperanza's hand and left. Only young Marcus remained. The boy couldn't be more than 10, but his eyes held decades of hardship. His grandfather had been enslaved on the Whitmore ranch before the war. "You staying, Marcus?" "Yes, ma'am. Granddaddy says learning is the one thing they can't take away." Hoofbeats thundered outside. Esperanza peered through the broken window. A giant of a man dismounted from a massive bay horse. His frame stretched well over 6 ft with shoulders that could carry timber. Dust covered his dark clothes, suggesting long travel. The crowd outside fell silent. The stranger approached Cordelia Whitmore with surprising grace for his size. "Ma'am, I'm looking for the school teacher, the colored lady." Cordelia's face twisted with disgust. "What business could you possibly have with that woman?" "Educational business. She's in that ramshackle building, wasting everyone's time, though I can't imagine why a man of your stature would associate with her type." The giant tipped his hat and walked toward the schoolhouse. Each step seemed measured, purposeful. Esperanza quickly straightened her simple brown dress and smoothed her hair. No one had ever come looking specifically for her. The door opened slowly. The man had to duck under the frame. His pale blue eyes scanned the empty room before settling on her face. Something shifted in his expression, recognition without prior meeting. "Miss Caldwell." "Yes, sir, Magnus Thornfield. I've traveled from Colorado Territory to speak with you." Marcus shifted nervously in his seat. The boy had seen enough trouble to recognize it approaching. "About what, Mr. Thornfield?" Magnus removed his hat, revealing sandy hair and premature lines around it. His eyes, "Your reputation as an educator precedes you. I have a proposition." The crowd outside pressed closer to the windows. Esperanza felt their curious stares like brands on her skin. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately." "No, ma'am. What I have to say, the whole town needs to hear." Magnus stepped back outside. His voice carried with surprising refinement when he addressed the gathered townspeople. "Folks, I've come a long way to find this teacher. I've heard remarkable things about her methods and dedication. Cordelia laughed harshly. Remarkable. She has 3 students on a good day. Most days she talks to empty air. Sometimes the most valuable things appear worthless to those who don't understand their true nature. Esperanza stepped onto the schoolhouse porch. The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty street. Every face in the crowd showed some mixture of curiosity, contempt, or amusement. Magnus turned to face her directly. His next words would echo in her memory forever. "Mrs. Speranza Caldwell, I've come to make you an offer. In the next 13 springs you'll give me 10 sons." The silence stretched like a held breath. Then chaos erupted. "Have you lost your mind?" "That's indecent. What kind of arrangement is that?" Esperanza's cheeks burned with embarrassment and anger. "Mr. Thornfield, I don't know what kind of woman you think I am, but I can assure you that I am not available for any such arrangement." Magnus raised his hand for silence. "You misunderstand my meaning, Miss Caldwell. I'm not speaking of biological sons. I'm speaking of something far more valuable." The crowd quieted, confusion replacing outrage. "I'm speaking of young minds shaped by education. 10 boys who will carry knowledge and dignity into the world. 10 future leaders who will prove that learning recognizes no boundaries of birth or circumstance." Reverend Morco stepped forward from the crowd. "Mr. Thornfield, while your intentions may be noble, the reality of our situation is quite different. Miss Caldwell's school has been struggling to attract students, struggling because you've all decided it should fail before giving it a proper chance." Cordelia's voice cut sharp as a blade. "We have our own school. We don't need her. Methods confusing our children." Magnus pulled a folded paper from his coat pocket. Esperanza recognized the formal letter head immediately. Her inheritance notice. How had he gotten it? Her hands shook as the implications crashed over her. The mining fortune her uncle had left her in California, enough money to leave dust, would ridge forever. To start fresh somewhere her skin color wouldn't determine her worth. Magnus's eyes met hers. He knew about the money. He knew she could walk away from all of this. Miss Caldwell has choices. He said quietly, she could leave tomorrow and live comfortably anywhere she pleased. The question is whether this town deserves the gift she's offering. The crowd began murmuring among themselves. Esperanza felt the weight of decision settling on her shoulders. Leave with dignity and wealth, or stay and fight for something larger than herself. Magnus stepped closer. "I'm prepared to help you build something lasting here, something that will outlive us both. 10 young men who will change the world through the power of education." The morning sun climbed higher, casting shorter shadows. The future balanced on the edge of her next words. The broken windows multiplied. Overnight, Esperanza swept glass shards into neat piles as dawn broke over Dustwood Ridge. Someone had also stolen her meager supply of chalk and torn pages from her precious books. The message was clear. Magnus appeared in the doorway carrying lumber and nails. He set to work without asking permission. His hands moved with practiced precision, measuring and cutting with tools he brought from his saddle bags. "Why are you helping me? Because what you're doing matters." Cordelia Whitmore's campaign intensified daily. The general store refused to sell Esperanza paper or ink. The boarding house owner tripled her rent. Even the church ladies turned their backs when she passed on the street. 3 days passed without a single student appearing. Mrs. Patterson sent word through a neighbor that her family forbade her return. Sarah's mother found work in the next county to avoid the social pressure. Only Marcus remained loyal, but his grandfather worried about their safety. Magnus worked steadily on the schoolhouse repairs. He replaced every broken window and reinforced the sagging roof. When Esperanza protested she couldn't afford to pay him, he simply continued hammering. The harassment followed predictable patterns: rocks through windows after dark, horse manure dumped on the front steps, anonymous notes threatening worse consequences if she didn't leave town voluntarily. Timothy Ashford lingered at the edge of school property each morning. The 12-year-old boy clearly wanted to join the lessons, but family loyalty held him back. His father owned the largest grain operation in 3 counties and served as Cordelia's most vocal supporter. One morning, Timothy crept close enough to hear Esperanza teaching Marcus about crop rotation. The boy's eyes widened as she explained how proper soil management could double wheat yields. He scribbled notes in the dirt with a stick. Magnus noticed the boy's interest. He began speaking louder when discussing practical farming techniques, ensuring Timothy could overhear from his hiding spot behind the oak tree. Miss Caldwell's methods aren't just book learning, Magnus announced to no one in particular. She connects knowledge to real problems folks face every day. The comment was clearly intended for Timothy's ears. The boy nodded eagerly before catching himself and looking around nervously. That evening, Timothy approached the schoolhouse after dark. Magnus stood guard outside while Esperanza conducted her first secret lesson. The boy absorbed information like drought-parched earth soaking up rain. "My father says book learning makes men soft. Knowledge makes men powerful," Esperanza replied. "Ignorance makes them weak." Timothy's progress was remarkable. Within weeks, he was reading at a level that surpassed many adults in town. His mathematical abilities impressed even Magnus, whose own education had been extensive before life took darker turns. The giant revealed fragments of his past. Gradually, born to missionary parents in Boston, educated at Harvard before the war changed everything. A family lost to violence that drove him to become what he once despised. "I spent years tracking dangerous men for money. Some deserved it, others were just desperate." Esperanza sensed deeper currents beneath his words. Magnus carried guilt that had shaped every decision since hanging up his guns. "What changed? I realized I was becoming the very thing that destroyed my family." Violence bred violence until nothing good remained. 3 more families quietly expressed interest in secret lessons. The children would come after dark when prying eyes couldn't see. Magnus expanded his guard duties, watching for trouble, while education flourished in shadows. The nighttime school grew to 8 students within a month. Esperanza adapted her teaching methods to accommodate varying skill levels and backgrounds. Magnus contributed practical instruction in carpentry, animal husbandry, and basic engineering principles. Word spread through whispered conversations and impressive results. Children who attended the secret sessions showed marked improvements in problem-solving ability. Their parents noticed but dared not speak openly about the source of their progress. Cordelia organized a formal town meeting to address the school problem once and for all. The announcement promised a final resolution to what she termed this disruptive experiment. Magnus spent the day before the meeting making preparations of his own. He retrieved documents from his saddlebags that he'd kept carefully hidden, legal papers that could change everything if revealed at the right moment. Esperanza reviewed her inheritance letter one final time. The mining fortune offered complete escape from Dustwood Ridge's hostility, a comfortable life without daily battles or constant fear. Part of her longed for such peace, but 8 young minds depended on her now. Timothy showed leadership potential that could bridge racial divides given proper nurturing. The other students displayed talents that would waste away without educational opportunity. The meeting hall filled beyond capacity. Families crowded together while tensions simmered beneath forced politeness. Cordelia commanded center stage with practiced authority. "This situation has disrupted our community long enough. We have children sneaking around at night instead of maintaining proper associations. We have outsiders interfering in family decisions." Magnus stood slowly in the back of the room. His height and bearing commanded immediate attention. "I've seen remarkable progress in every child who's received Miss Caldwell's instruction. Perhaps the problem isn't her teaching methods, but your resistance to proven results." "What results?" Cordelia demanded. "She barely has any students because you've terrorized families into staying away." Despite your efforts, the children who do attend show improvements that surpass anything your established school produces. Timothy's father rose from his seat. My son has been attending these secret meetings against my explicit orders. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Timothy shrank back as all eyes focused on him. Stand up, son. The boy stood on trembling legs. His father's anger was legendary throughout the county. Tell everyone what you've learned. Timothy's voice barely carried across the room, but his words would change everything. Timothy's voice grew stronger as he spoke. Miss Caldwell taught me why our wheat yields dropped last season. The soil needs nitrogen rotation every third year. She showed me how to calculate seed spacing for maximum growth. His father's expression shifted from anger to surprise. The Ashford grain operation had indeed struggled with declining harvests. She taught me to read land surveys and water table maps. I can't figure compound interest for crop loans now. Real mathematics that matter to farming. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Several farmers leaned forward with obvious interest. Timothy pulled a folded paper from his pocket. I wrote a report on soil composition testing. Miss Caldwell says knowledge without application is just decoration. The room fell silent as the boy's father examined the document. His weathered face showed grudging amazement at his son's clear handwriting and detailed calculations. Magnus stepped forward. That young man learned more practical skills in 1 month than most children acquire in years of traditional schooling. Cordelia's voice cut sharp as winter wind. Pretty words and farm tricks don't justify undermining established authority. We have proper schools with proper teachers. Then let's compare results directly. The challenge hung in the air like smoke. From a gunshot, Esperanza felt every eye in the room focus on her. This moment would determine everything. I propose a public examination. Magnus continued. Miss Caldwell's students against your best pupils. Academic subjects and practical applications both. Cordelia's face flushed red. She had expected to crush opposition through social pressure, not academic competition. That's hardly necessary. Everyone knows the quality of our established education. Then you shouldn't fear the comparison. Reverend Morco rose from his seat near the front. His voice carried moral authority that commanded respect. Perhaps such a demonstration would settle the matter fairly. Let results speak louder than assumptions. The crowd began taking sides. Farmers who had noticed their children's improvements supported the examination. Established families worried about social disruption if change proved necessary. Esperanza found her voice despite her racing heart. I accept the challenge. 1 week from today, public examination covering reading, writing, mathematics, and practical problem solving. The meeting dispersed with electric tension crackling between opposing groups. Magnus walked Esperanza back to the schoolhouse while shadows lengthened across the dusty street. Are you certain about this? We've moved beyond certainty. Now we prove what we've built. The following days blurred together in intensive preparation. Magnus revealed the full scope of his education as he helped design examination questions. His Harvard training had included classical rhetoric, advanced mathematics, and natural philosophy. My father believed knowledge belonged to everyone willing to work for it. He taught former slaves alongside plantation owners' children until violence forced them to leave Georgia. Esperanza understood why Magnus had sought her out specifically. She represented his family's interrupted mission, continued in different circumstances. Secret supporters emerged from unexpected places. The blacksmith provided metal materials for practical demonstrations. 2 farming families contributed supplies while avoiding public association with the effort. Timothy became the bridge between worlds. His obvious improvements impressed even skeptical neighbors. Other children began asking parents for permission to attend the examination as observers. Magnus spent evenings researching property records in the courthouse basement. The building's archives contained decades of land transactions and legal documents. His methodical search uncovered patterns that told disturbing stories. I found something significant. He spread faded survey maps across Esperanza's desk. Property boundaries from 40 years earlier showed different ownership than current records indicated. Your grandfather owned substantial acreage where the Whitmore Ranch now stands. These documents show the original homestead claims. Esperanza traced the boundaries with her finger. The land encompassed prime grazing territory and water rights worth enormous sums by current standards. How did the ownership change? Forged transfer documents dated just after your family left the territory. The signatures don't match any legal witnesses from that period. The implications crashed over her. Like floodwaters, her family hadn't simply moved away. They had been systematically robbed of valuable property through fraudulent legal manipulation. Cordelia's husband signed as witness to the transfer, but the courthouse records show he was in Denver on business during the supposed transaction. Date: Magnus had uncovered not just historical injustice, but ongoing criminal fraud. The revelation shifted power dynamics completely. What do we do with this information? We use it strategically. Timing matters more than righteousness when confronting established corruption. The examination date arrived with unseasonably warm weather. The entire town gathered in the church hall since no other building could accommodate the crowd. Neutral observers came from neighboring settlements to witness the unprecedented contest. 8 children sat on one side representing Esperanza's teaching methods. The established schools selected their 6 best students for comparison. The contrast was immediately obvious. Esperanza's students displayed calm confidence despite their diverse backgrounds and ages. The traditional students seemed nervous under pressure from family expectations and social scrutiny. The academic portions proceeded systematically: reading comprehension, mathematical problem solving, written composition, and oral presentation. Each section revealed growing disparities in skill levels and practical application abilities. Timothy delivered a presentation on agricultural improvements that left several farmers taking detailed notes. Marcus solved geometry problems using construction principles Magnus had taught him. Even the youngest students demonstrated reading abilities that surpassed their traditional counterparts. The practical applications sealed the demonstration. Esperanza's students calculated real estate values, designed simple machines, and explained scientific principles underlying common farming problems. Their education connected directly to adult responsibilities and economic realities. The established schools students struggled with any application beyond rote memorization. Their knowledge remained compartmentalized and impractical for frontier life's demands. As the examination concluded, even Cordelia's strongest supporters could not deny the obvious superiority of results. The educational revolution had demonstrated itself. Through undeniable evidence, Magnus chose that moment to reveal his most powerful weapon. Magnus unfolded the yellowed survey maps before the stunned crowd. The documents crackled with age as he spread them across the makeshift podium. Every eye in the church hall focused on the faded ink and official seals. These are the original land grants from 1847. They show clear ownership records that differ significantly from current property boundaries. Cordelia's face drained of color. Her husband shifted nervously in his seat, recognizing the potential implications of historical document examination. According to these surveys, Esperanza Caldwell's grandfather held legal title to approximately 3,000 acres of prime grazing land, the same territory that now comprises the eastern section of the Whitmore Ranch. Gasps echoed through the packed hall. The Whitmore Ranch represented the county's most valuable agricultural property. Water rights alone were worth fortunes in the arid territory. Magnus produced additional documents from his leather satchel. The transfer records show suspicious irregularities, witness signatures that don't match courthouse records, dates that contradict documented travel logs, legal procedures that violate territorial statutes. Esperanza sat motionless as the revelations washed over the assembly. Her family's disappearance from the territory suddenly made perfect sense. They hadn't left voluntarily. They had been systematically driven out after losing their rightful property to fraud. Mr. Thornfield, these accusations are outrageous. Cordelia's voice trembled with barely controlled fury. My family acquired that land through legitimate transactions decades ago. Then you won't object to a formal legal review of all documentation. The trap closed with devastating precision. Cordelia could not refuse without appearing guilty, but agreement would expose the fraudulent transfers to territorial court examination. Timothy stood suddenly from his seat among the other students. His young voice carried surprising authority as he addressed the assembly. Miss Caldwell never asked for anything except the chance to teach. You all tried to drive her away because you were afraid of what she represented. Now we discover she has more right to be here than most of us. His father's hand fell on the boy's shoulder with obvious pride. The transformation from opponent to supporter was complete and public. My son learned more in 2 months of night school than 3 years at our established institution. That's not an opinion. It's measurable fact demonstrated here. Today, other parents began voicing similar sentiments. The educational superiority was undeniable after the public examination. Children who had attended Esperanza's classes showed advanced skills that translated directly to adult responsibilities. Magnus sensed the moment for maximum impact. Miss Caldwell has legal claim to property worth more than most of us will earn in our lifetimes. She could pursue full restitution through territorial courts and likely succeed. The implications hung heavy as storm clouds. If Esperanza reclaimed her family's stolen land, the economic foundation of Dustwood Ridge would shift dramatically. Property values, water rights, and agricultural leases would require complete renegotiation. Instead, she chose to serve this community as an educator. She invested her inheritance money in school improvements rather than legal fees for property recovery. Esperanza found her voice despite the emotional turmoil of learning about her family's true history. I didn't come here seeking wealth or revenge. I came seeking the opportunity to teach children who deserve better futures. The words carried across the silent hall with quiet dignity. Even former opponents recognized the grace in her position. But I won't continue accepting harassment and sabotage while providing a service this community desperately needs. Magnus stepped beside her with protective presence. Miss Caldwell is prepared to establish the first integrated school in 3 territories, modern educational methods that prepare children for changing times. Reverend Morco rose from his seat with moral authority that commanded respect. Perhaps we should consider this an opportunity, rather than a threat. Educational excellence benefits everyone's children. The crowd began dividing into new alliances based on demonstrated results rather than inherited prejudices. Practical parents recognized superior teaching when their children's improvement could not be denied. Cordelia made one final attempt to maintain control. This is all very dramatic, but we have established institutions that serve our community adequately. Your institutions just failed a public comparison test, Magnus replied flatly. 8 children with limited resources outperformed your best students in every category. Timothy stepped forward again with the fearless honesty of youth. Miss Caldwell taught us that ignorance is a choice. You can choose to keep making it, but we don't have to. The boy's words carried more power than any adult argument. Children speaking truth to established authority created undeniable moral pressure. Families began approaching Esperanza directly to discuss enrollment for their children. The economic advantages of superior education outweighed social concerns when practical benefits were obvious. Magnus organized informal groups to discuss implementation details. The transformation from resistance to cooperation happened gradually, but inevitably parents recognize their children's needs, will need expanded facilities to accommodate increased enrollment. Miss Caldwell's property claims include suitable land for construction. The territorial government offers grants for innovative educational programs, plans developed organically as the community imagined new possibilities. The fear of change gave way to excitement about educational opportunities previously unavailable in frontier settlements. Esperanza felt the weight of historical injustice transform into leverage for positive change. Her family's stolen legacy would become the foundation for educational progress that honored their memory. Magnus' original promise began taking concrete form. 10 young men receiving exceptional education who would carry knowledge and dignity throughout the territory. The vision expanded beyond individual students to systematic change that could influence an entire generation. The evening concluded with unprecedented cooperation between former adversaries. Practical necessities created strange alliances as the community adapted to new realities. Cordelia departed in tight-lipped silence, her social authority permanently diminished by legal revelations and educational failure. The old order had crumbled under the weight of demonstrated truth. The legal documents arrived from the territorial capital within 10 days. Official seals confirmed Magnus' research. Esperanza held clear title to 3,000 acres of prime ranch land, mineral rights included. The fraudulent transfers were declared null and void by territorial decree. Cordelia Whitmore packed her belongings in bitter silence. Her husband faced criminal charges for document forgery and illegal property seizure. Decades of stolen prosperity crumbled under legal scrutiny that revealed systematic corruption extending beyond a single family. The community watched in stunned fascination as power structures realigned overnight. Esperanza transformed from dismissed outcasts to the largest landowner in 3 counties. Her inheritance combined with recovered property created wealth that dwarfed most territorial fortunes. Magnus handled the legal transitions with methodical precision. His Harvard education included sufficient law study to navigate complex property transfers. He ensured every document was properly filed and witnessed to prevent future disputes. You could own half the territory if you pursued every fraudulent claim. I want justice, not conquest. Esperanza used her newfound authority with careful restraint. She offered fair buyouts to families who had unknowingly purchased stolen land. Tenant farmers received generous lease terms that improved their circumstances rather than destroying them. The old schoolhouse was demolished to make room for a proper educational facility. Construction began immediately using local labor at wages that exceeded regional standards. The project employed dozens of men who had previously shunned any association with the despised teacher. Timothy supervised younger workers with knowledge gained from Magnus' engineering instruction. The boys' leadership abilities impressed adults who recognized natural talent when properly cultivated. Miss Caldwell says the building should serve the community. For 50 years, every detail matters for permanent construction. Other children from the secret night classes demonstrated similar growth. Marcus designed efficient water systems using mathematical principles that reduced construction costs. Even the youngest students contributed practical solutions that improved the overall project. Enrollment applications arrived daily from families throughout the territory. Word of the educational revolution spread through trading networks that connected isolated settlements. Parents traveled hundreds of miles seeking admission for their children. Magnus established admission criteria that prioritized merit over social standing. Academic potential and family commitment to education mattered more than wealth or connections. The selection process created unprecedented diversity in frontier education. We're not just building a school, we're proving that excellence recognizes no artificial boundaries. The first integrated classes began before construction was complete. Temporary facilities accommodated 60 students of varying backgrounds and abilities. White, black, and Mexican children learned together using methods that emphasized cooperation over competition. Esperanza adapted her teaching techniques to serve the expanded population. She organized students by ability rather than age, allowing advanced learners to progress rapidly while ensuring struggling students received necessary support. Magnus taught practical skills that complemented academic instruction. Carpentry, mechanics, agricultural science, and basic engineering provided hands-on applications for theoretical knowledge. Students learned by solving real problems that affected their families and communities. The educational model attracted attention from territorial administrators in distant capitals. Government officials visited to observe innovative methods that produced measurable results. Their reports praised the unique combination of academic rigor and practical application. This institution represents the future of frontier education. Students graduate with skills that immediately benefit their communities. Success stories multiplied as the first graduates demonstrated their capabilities. Former students established businesses, improved farming operations, and provided leadership in neighboring settlements. The educational investment paid dividends throughout the territory. Cordelia made a final appearance at the school's dedication ceremony. Her reduced circumstances were evident in worn clothing and borrowed transportation. The proud matriarch had become a cautionary example of justice delayed but not denied. She approached Esperanza with genuine humility that surprised former allies and enemies alike. I was wrong about you, about everything you represented. We all make mistakes. The measure of character is how we respond to truth when it's revealed. The conversation was brief but significant. Cordelia's public acknowledgement of error provided closure that allowed the community to move forward without lingering resentment. Magnus counted enrollment figures with satisfaction. As the second year began, 87 students attended regular classes with another 43 in evening programs for working adults. Original vision had expanded beyond his most optimistic projections. 10 young men now formed the advanced leadership class he had envisioned in his original promise. Timothy led the group with natural authority that bridged racial and economic divisions. The boys planned to establish similar schools and territories throughout the expanding frontier. Education multiplies when properly planted. These 10 will teach hundreds who will teach thousands. The mathematical progression of knowledge transfer created exponential impact that would influence generations. Magnus' impossible vow was becoming measurable reality through systematic implementation. Esperanza reviewed applications for the teacher training program funded by her recovered inheritance. Young women from across the territory sought instruction in modern educational methods that they could carry to isolated communities lacking proper schools. We're not just changing Dustwood Ridge, we're changing the entire frontier. The ripple effect spread through economic and social networks that connected distant settlements. Former students carried letters of recommendation that opened opportunities previously reserved for established families. Merit began replacing privilege as the standard for advancement. Property values throughout the region increased as families relocated to access superior educational opportunities. The economic benefits of academic excellence attracted investment that transformed the entire territory from backward frontier to progressive settlement. Magnus surveyed the completed campus with deep satisfaction. Modern buildings housed advanced equipment that rivaled Eastern institutions. The investment in permanent facilities reflected confidence in long-term success that would serve multiple generations. The impossible had become inevitable through persistent application of truth and dignity. 2 outcasts had transformed an entire community by refusing to accept artificial limitations imposed by ignorance and prejudice. The spring graduation approached with unprecedented enrollment and community support. The graduation platform stood beneath towering oak trees that had witnessed the transformation of Dustwood Ridge. Families from across 3 territories gathered for the ceremony that would mark the completion of Magnus's impossible promise. 5 years had passed since his outrageous vow to the lonely teacher. 10 young men sat in the front row, wearing identical blue sashes that identified them as the first leadership class. Timothy Ashford held the position of student speaker, his presence bridging worlds that once seemed permanently divided. Marcus represented formerly enslaved families who had found dignity through education. 8 others came from diverse backgrounds united by shared learning. Esperanza stood at the podium reviewing her prepared remarks. The nervous teacher who once spoke to empty chairs had become a confident educator whose methods were studied throughout the Western territories. Her transformation mirrored the community's evolution from hostility to embrace of integrated progress. Magnus watched from the side of the platform with quiet satisfaction. The giant cowboy had fulfilled his promise through patience and strategic wisdom rather than force or intimidation. His 10 sons were ready to carry knowledge and dignity into an expanding world. Today we celebrate more than individual achievement. Esperanza began. We celebrate proof that excellence recognizes no artificial boundaries imposed by ignorance or prejudice. The audience included former opponents who now supported the educational revolution they once resisted. Practical results had overcome theoretical objections as children demonstrated capabilities that benefited entire families and communities. Timothy rose to deliver the student address. His words carried authority earned through academic achievement and moral courage displayed during the community's most challenging moments. 5 years ago, Miss Caldwell taught empty chairs because fear prevented families from embracing opportunity. Today, we graduate knowing that education is the foundation of freedom and dignity. The young man's speech traced the school's evolution from secret night classes to the territorial model institution. His perspective provided historical context that reminded everyone how dramatically circumstances had changed. Mr. Thornfield promised 10 sons through education rather than biology. We represent that promise fulfilled, but also the beginning of something larger. Each graduate had already secured placement in positions throughout the territory. Some would teach in communities lacking proper schools. Others planned business ventures that would employ local workers at fair wages. 2 intended to pursue law degrees that would bring justice to frontier settlements. The multiplication effect was already visible in practical terms. Former students had established 17 schools in isolated communities using methods learned at Dustwood Ridge. Educational revolution was spreading organically through networks of shared knowledge and proven results. Magnus stepped forward to address the assembly as construction supervisor and practical skills instructor. His role had evolved from mysterious stranger to essential community member whose contributions were universally recognized. When I made my promise to Miss Caldwell, many of you considered it impossible or inappropriate. Today, you witness the power of education to transform individuals, communities, and entire regions. The teacher training program had graduated 43 women who carried modern educational methods throughout the frontier. Young teachers armed with superior techniques were establishing schools that served previously neglected populations. Esperanza's inheritance and recovered property provided permanent funding for expansion that would continue indefinitely. The economic foundation ensured that educational excellence would not depend on temporary political support or individual generosity. These 10 young men represent the first harvest of a permanent planting. Magnus continued. Their children and students will carry this influence into the next century. The ceremony concluded with the presentation of graduation certificates signed by territorial officials who recognized the institution's exceptional standards. Each document represented individual achievement within a larger transformation that had redefined educational possibilities. Families gathered for celebratory meals that mixed formerly segregated social groups in unprecedented harmony. The graduation feast demonstrated practical integration that had evolved naturally from shared educational experiences. Timothy's father approached Esperanza with gratitude that reflected his complete transformation from opponent to supporter. The successful farmer credited his son's education with improving their agricultural operations and expanding economic opportunities. "You gave my boy knowledge that will serve him throughout life. More importantly, you taught him that character matters more than circumstances of birth." Similar conversations occurred throughout the gathering as parents recognized the gift their children had received. Educational excellence had created measurable improvements in family circumstances and community prosperity. Magnus and Esperanza walked through the campus as evening shadows lengthened across carefully maintained grounds. The permanent facilities represented investment in future generations who would benefit from their sacrifice and vision. The 10 sons are ready to change the world, and they're only the beginning. The promise had been fulfilled, but its implications extended far beyond the original commitment. Systematic change was occurring through the multiplication of knowledge and the persistence of truth applied with dignity and strategic wisdom. Applications for the following year exceeded facility capacity by substantial margins. The success of the educational model had created demand that required continued expansion to serve families seeking opportunities for their children. The impossible vow had become inevitable reality through patient application of principles that recognized human potential. Regardless of artificial limitations, 2 outcasts had transformed an entire region by refusing to accept predetermined roles assigned by ignorance and prejudice. The graduation celebration continued late into the evening as the community marked the completion of 1 chapter and the beginning of countless others. The 10 sons would carry their education throughout the expanding frontier, multiplying the impact of Magnus' promise through generations yet unborn. Education had proven more powerful than force, dignity more effective than revenge, and truth more lasting than convenience. The transformation of Dustwood Ridge would influence the development of the American frontier for decades to come. And that is all to the story for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you it's worth watching.